I want to welcome everybody this evening, June 14th, to the Rules Committee meeting. Mr. Clerk, we have a variety of items on the agenda. Why don't we go through the other items quickly? Let's take item 1 and set it aside. So why don't you read the item, and then we will go through the other items.
Okay. Item number 1 is a joint Los Angeles Housing Community Investment Department and Human Relations Commission reports relative to the historical importance and cultural impact of establishing Indigenous Peoples Day as a legal city holiday. Item number 2 is City Attorney Report and Ordinance relative to establishing a Cannabis Commission, Department, and Executive Director. Item number 3 is Motion Wesson Koritz Price et al. Relative to a social equity analysis of cannabis regulations aimed at promoting equitable ownership and employment opportunities in the cannabis industry. Item number 4 is City Ethics Commission report relative to amending the campaign finance ordinance regarding disclaimer requirements for political communications. Item number 5 is City Attorney and City Ethics Commission reports and ordinance relative to amending the Los Angeles Administrative Code regarding City Ethics Commission enforcement procedures. Item number 6 is Resolution Martinez, Harris Dawson, and CLA report relative to the city's position on SB 784, which would make it a misdemeanor to distribute images of an identifiable person in full or partial address without that person's knowledge or consent. Item number 7 is Resolution Price O'Farrell and CLA report relative to the city's position on extending the Proposition 84 grant performance period for Slauson-Wall Park in Council District 9. Item number 8 is Resolution Price O'Farrell and CLA report relative to the city's position on extending the Proposition 84 grant performance period for Nevin Avenue Elementary Park in Council District 9. Item number 9 is Resolution Martinez-Rue and CLA report relative to the city's position on Assembly Bill 1218 to extend the sunset on CEQA exemptions for bicycle transportation plans and bicycle lanes. Item number 10 is Resolution Martinez-Rue and CLA report relative to the city's position on amending AB 485 to allow pet shops to offer adoption animals from shelters and rescuers in lieu of animals for sale from commercial breeders. Item number 11 is Resolution Wesson O'Farrell and CLA report relative to the city's position on extending the Proposition 84 grant period for West Lakeside Street Park in Council District 7. Item number 12 is Resolution Koritz Blumenfeld and CLA report relative to the city's position on AB 1199 to require training for California peace officers on responding to unexpected situations when encountering a dog. And item number 13 is revised Resolution Kokorian O'Farrell relative to the city's position on AB 1597 regarding divestment of Turkish government investments.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I'm joined today by Mr. Weezer and Mr. Harris Dawson. So yes, we have a quorum and we have a full complement. Every member that's supposed to be here is here. We have a couple of speakers that have filled out cards on multiple items. I will call them. They can speak a total of 2 minutes on any of these items, but so each of them will get 2 minutes. Sergeants, if you can let Mr. Spindler and Mr. Herman come forward.
All right, so as again, our meeting is brought to you by Marlboro, our favorite cigarette of choice at City Hall.
You're not on the subject, Mr. Spindler.
What's that?
This is your last warning, okay? You're not on the subject. Get off again, and then you'll forfeit your time.
So, we have the ultimate racist on number 1, Indigenous Peoples Day, being promoted by a man who's a racist, a man who's worthless. It's a great thing. The problem is October the 31st at Arts, Parks, and Rivers, We got the chairman of that committee here. We got Mr. O'Farrell here, councilman, and they had to refer it without recommendation because they couldn't get a fucking quorum to even care about Indigenous Peoples Day. That's why it's here without recommendation. Now the guy shows up today, patting all the Native American supporters on the back when he couldn't even get a quorum to bother to give a fuck about this. Then all that negative publicity got out there. So these people are absolute fakers. They're posers. That's what they are. They're posers. Now, we want to change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. I'm in full support. My grandfather was half Cherokee Indian Nation, man, okay? It's beautiful people. So absolutely, they were here first. They were here before Columbus. They were here before Amerigo Vespucci, all right? And it absolutely should be done. But we talk about police and dogs on one of your items on the schedule. How do police avoid abusing dogs? Give the puppy a pat, and finally, fuck you, City Council.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Herman.
Good grief. Proposition medical marijuana dispensaries. It's the voters, all the voters here today that want a job and create new entrepreneur. Let them sell their medical marijuana. That's what the voters voted on. That's what you have to make possible. Then you go to item 3, dealing with what? Regulations on more equitable? No, I got a new invention. Let's call it edible marijuana clothing. This way, you don't just get a high, but you get a ride. Ask Weezer, Francine Godoy production. And then you go to item number 4, City Ethics Commission, Finance Ordinance to improve laws regarding disclaimer requirements. No one really cares. Then I go to the 12th. Let me go to item 1 since I didn't sign up for it, because it's a part of the indigenous people. Leave them alone. But your nose is out. You stepped into the play too late, O'Farrell.
Stay
You're
on
like
the
one of those
subject.
cheerleaders on the sideline. And then I go into item number 12, encouraging police officers to respect the dog. Roof, roof. Well, you know what? You should learn to respect the homeless people that you look at as dogs, because the only retribution in life an animal and a human have connection is you, Herb. And then I go into item 13, resolution, Krikorian, and again O'Farrell, CLA report relative AB 1597. Nazarian is right. You're a bunch of fuck-ups.
Thank you. Okay, let's, on those items, members, they're items that under normal circumstances I think would have been on the consent calendar. So unless either one of you want to make a statement on one of those items, without objection, Mr. Clerk, we deem those items approved.
That's items 2.
That's items 2 through 13.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay. Now, do we have, I thought I saw him earlier, Francisco from Human Relations. Why don't you come up and let's go through the report.
And Mr. Chair,
Yes.
for the record, a revised resolution was circulated for item number 13.
Okay, so then it's approved as amended or as revised, okay? In fact, before you get started, this is one of those rare occasions when other members adjust their calendar so that they can come and speak before the committees. So, Francisco, what I want to do is get our colleague, Mr. O'Farrell, if you'd come sit at the table and maybe you can open this up. Then we'll go through the Human Relations Commission report. So the floor is yours, Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, The first person I was going to thank actually today was Francisco Ortega, who led this process from the Human Relations Commission over the past year and a half, from the time that I introduced the motion in November of 2015, that really set in motion exploring the creation of Indigenous Peoples Day as a city holiday in Los Angeles. There were many meetings held, really great participation from interested parties, many of whom are in this chamber today, through months of deliberation and dialogue and argument. And
Mr. Herman, chill out. This is too important an issue. No. Okay, you can leave. So I'm asking you to be calm, respect the other people that are here on a very important issue, or you can leave. Okay? If I have to talk to you again, I will ask the sergeants to show you the door. So, no, sergeants, he wants to leave. Mr. City Attorney, is disrupting this meeting.
He was, and it was not a fleeting gesture. He's repeatedly moving in an attempt to distract us and disrupting the meeting.
He's doing it again. Sergeants, just take him. Sergeants, go on. You can leave. You can leave, and you can take your sidekick with you.
And just for the record, in case Mike's not picking it up, he is continuing to make noise as he leaves the meeting to slow things down.
Yes. Why don't we try this again,
Okay, thank you. What I was saying.
Mr. O'Farrell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I was saying, colleagues, is that a lot of good people gave of their time. They gave of their thoughts and their values in this process on just what Indigenous Peoples Day in Los Angeles could look like. I also want to thank my staff for their diligent work with city staff, Star Parsamian and Mr. David Hiron, who have been working on this from the very beginning. And so, colleagues, what I want to do is just lay out some information that I think explains the rationale and the perspective that I bring to this conversation. And I will be as deliberate and succinct as I possibly can. Starting with the historical, upon landing on a Caribbean island in 1492, Christopher Columbus set in motion a complete genocide of the indigenous inhabitants that are present-day Haiti and the Dominican Republic. The Taino, that was the tribe, were believed to have numbered at least 100,000 in 1492. After they were conquered, enslaved, summarily murdered for insubordination, less than a century later, there was literally no visible sign that they ever existed. It was a complete genocide. Their extinction led the Spanish to begin importing slaves from Africa to work the plantations and the mineral mines. During the French occupation beginning in 1625, the African slave trade was accelerated. Christopher Columbus returned to the West Indies and Central and South America 3 more times, triggering the same systemic, violent process of dominance, slavery, and subjugation of indigenous people, resulting in a centuries-long genocide unmatched in breadth, duration, and scale anywhere else on Earth in recorded history. Christopher Columbus, as we all know, never set foot on the shores of North America, but Native American people here shared a similar fate as those in the rest of the Western Hemisphere. Hundreds of years later, Spanish explorers came to California. By 1769, a system of 21 missions were becoming established between San Diego and San Francisco. The purpose of the Spanish missions was to subjugate all indigenous populations to Spanish rule, forcibly convert them to Christianity, claim their land, set up farming, and enslave the indigenous people to then farm the land. Those that could not escape were relocated to settlements under complete control of the mission system for generations. This formal arrangement lasted until 1833. During and after the Spanish mission period, there are reams of documents describing barbaric activities geared toward the indigenous tribes in California in particular, including cash rewards for hunting and killing Native Americans. This barbarism endured throughout Spanish, Mexican, and U.S. rule. In the late 1800s, a mythology set in that sought to rewrite the history of the colonization of the Western Hemisphere and rebrand the subjugation, murder, and devastation as a first contact, portraying Columbus as a benign explorer who discovered America. For decades, this false narrative was promoted in an organized effort to rewrite history. During this period and into the early 20th century, after over 500 treaties between Native Americans and the U.S. government had been broken, and for the record, every last treaty ever signed by a Native American tribe in the United States was broken, when indigenous people still didn't have the right to vote, when the Western Indian Wars were still being fought, when open hostility and discrimination against indigenous people was widespread and institutionalized in California and the rest of the country, the mythology took root. Indigenous people in the United States had no power on any level in society or in government. By 1937, after years of intense lobbying from the Knights of Columbus, Columbus Day was declared a federal holiday. Backing up a few years, in 1924, the Indian Citizenship Act gave Native Americans the right to vote. 1924. But that right was asserted only if a state allowed it. The last state to allow Native Americans to vote in the United States was New Mexico in 1962, when their state Supreme Court followed that of other states like Arizona and struck down a provision in their constitution that prohibited Native Americans from voting. According to the Los Angeles City County Native American Indian Commission, the city of Los Angeles has the second largest percentage of Native Americans in the United States, and Los Angeles County is home to more Native American and Alaska Natives than any other county in the United States. The three tribes in Los Angeles County that predate the California missions are the Ventureño, the Gabrielino Tongva, and the Fernandeño. This site where we are all gathered today, Los Angeles City Hall, was a former Tongva village, right underneath our feet. These tribes and their culture were so completely decimated by the mission system that they continue to struggle to meet the criteria for federal recognition, although they are recognized by the state of California. Their descendants continue to organize around tribal sovereignty, protect their cultural resources, and work to rebuild the legacy of their tribes. The push to replace Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day across this country continues. In 2015 and 2016, 36 cities and states added Indigenous Peoples Day on the second Monday in October, most of them replacing Columbus Day on their state or municipal administrative codes. Native American rates of poverty, clinical depression, unemployment, school dropout rates, obesity, diabetes, and other health-related illnesses, alcoholism, drug addiction, suicide, mortality rates in general, including infant mortality, outrank most other racial classifications in every single category. There is continuing psychological harm to Native American youth and Native Americans due to continued use of offensive and degrading sports mascots and the dehumanizing effect of celebrating a federal holiday for a man that most people identify as anything but a benign explorer, and other myths that perpetuate a romanticized version of conquest. Recognizing the contributions, history, and sacrifices made by the original inhabitants of the Los Angeles area is long overdue. It is time to reflect on the true legacy of Christopher Columbus and create a permanent tribute to the people who made it possible for the rest of us to make a life for ourselves on the lands that the original inhabitants were so mercilessly removed from. Across the American South, statues glorifying the Confederacy are rightfully coming down. Confederate flags are being removed from state and municipal houses. It's time we remove our own divisive symbol of hate from our city administrative code, and we must replace it, rightfully celebrating those that were here for thousands of years before any one of us. Colleagues, we have an opportunity to right a historical wrong, enact a critical piece of restorative justice, and move on to a more enlightened, authentic, and appropriate yearly commemoration that everyone can be proud of. I urge you to move this out of committee, remove the stain of Columbus Day from our administrative code, and replace the second Monday in October with Indigenous Peoples Day in the city of Los Angeles. Now, thank you. And lastly, I know that a letter is circulating to create an Immigrants' Day, and I'm very aware of that. I am 1,000% supportive of that. Immigrant Rights Month is June. I think that it would be wholly inappropriate to co-opt this effort to support an Immigrants' Day on the day that really belongs to Indigenous Peoples Day. And that's what I want to close with, and I hope to have your support.
Okay. We thank you for coming. If you have time, you're welcome to stay. There may be a question directed to you a little later on, but we heard you. Now, Mr. Clerk, we received a letter from Mr. Buscaino. Do you have a copy of that letter?
Yes, sir, I do.
Could you read that into the record in fairness?
Certainly. The letters from council members Joe Buscaino, Gil Cedillo, David Rue, and Mitchell Englander. The letters addressed to Chairman Wesson. Dear Chairman Wesson, the celebration of our diversity and variety of cultures is part of what defines us as a city and a nation. This has become even more apparent in light of the current climate in our society, highlighting the need for racial and ethnic harmony, and why we support the creation of Immigrant Heritage Day to succeed Columbus Day in the city of Los Angeles. For nearly a century, Italian Americans have celebrated Columbus Day as a way of recognizing their Italian American heritage. Those ideals under which the holiday was founded upon remain relevant today. The recognition of the hundreds of years of immigration to America and the notion that anyone can come here, work hard, succeed, and achieve the American dream. Those who sought to create Columbus Day back in the 1930s did so as a means to align themselves to a figure that, at that time, represented American patriotism. However, as times have changed, it is less about the man and more about celebrating immigrant heritage and the contributions that they have made to their communities. We believe that it is this concept, the celebration of immigrants, the melding of cultures, the beauty of people who have multiple backgrounds of European, African, Asian, and indigenous heritage that reflects the reality of who we are as a people today. This is who we are as a city. This is Los Angeles. While we support the creation of a separate Indigenous Peoples Day holiday, this is not a zero-sum game where one culture must win at the expense of others. We believe that it is important to remain true to the spirit behind the founding of the holiday on the second Monday of October, which is not about honoring one man, but about a universal theme that has become ubiquitous with the celebration of not only Italian American heritage, but the celebration of all cultures and the acknowledgement of the sacrifices and contributions made by their parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents to this great nation. This is why we support the creation of a holiday celebrating immigrant heritage in addition to an Indigenous Peoples Day holiday, because it recognizes the importance of unity and diversity. This is what has made our city succeed since its founding by the original settlers, the pobladores, who were themselves a mixture of indigenous, African, and European descent. Those who created Columbus Day were seeking a nation that is inclusive as a way to empower immigrants and celebrate their diversity. This day recognizes the beginning of worldwide immigration to America. It truly is a celebration of immigrants coming here to seek a better life for themselves and their families. Immigrant Heritage Day would be an appropriate way to recognize the contributions made by those who have made Los Angeles the world-class city that it is today. Sincerely, Council Members Joe Buscaino, Gil Cedillo, David Rue, and Mitchell Englander.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. Now, let's go to you, Francisco, and know that I do have cards from the public. I'm going to do my very best to get to every card, even though I think that we may want to ask a series of questions. And so I may ask some of the folk from the audience to respond to a question or two. So I want to put you not on alert, but tell you that I might want to get your insight on certain things. So with that said, if I could turn this over to you, Francisco, and let's go through your report.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to come back before the committee and discuss this issue. In 2016, in October, the Human Relations Commission put together a report. You received that report. The report pretty much outlines where we're at today on the issue of creating an Indigenous Peoples Day and replacing Columbus Day with it. We really gave, in the report in October 25th, 2016, we laid out some of the arguments on both sides. We've met with folks from the Indigenous community. We held many one-on-one conversations with folks, even administered a small survey that also got back some information, and we also included some of those findings in the report. I think bottom line, Mr. Chairman, the report really begins to, as Councilmember O'Farrell so well highlighted in the chronology, the city's Human Relations Commission was really tasked with an almost impossible task in a sense, because we're being asked to really convene where we have the power of convening. And so we convened. We brought people together. We held actually one meeting where it was a meeting that was both with stakeholders in the city that were opposed to the replacement of Columbus Day, the second Monday. They were opposed to have it changed over to Indigenous Peoples Day, and then we brought the Indigenous people, the community together. I think that in that context and in that room, I think we learned it was very respectful. There were very passionate points of view. But I think that, ultimately I want to just underscore a couple of things that Mr. O'Farrell went through. I think that the distinction that was made for Indigenous people to have for the first time, I think, in the city of LA, be recognized as the Aboriginal people of Los Angeles. For the first time, have the city recognize them. And also, historically, the arguments for Indigenous people, local Indigenous people, is that, the words like genocide and words like displacement and words like murder and violence and second-class citizens and exclusion. These words that matter to the Human Relations Commission were words that a lot of the stakeholders from the Indigenous people, from the Indigenous community, articulated very clearly. And on the other side, you had folks that were also equally as passionate for keeping that tradition for Columbus Day alive. Italian Americans in particular felt very strongly about that. And so we listened to them, we listened to their, and by the way, I think most Italian Americans that participated in the discussions and conversations, Mr. Chairman, also were in full support of having an Indigenous Peoples Day, our celebration, but were not willing to have it be replaced. As you heard in the letter written by those council members in support of Immigrant Peoples Day, you hear those same sentiments echoed in that letter about not a zero-sum game and not having one ethnic group or one cultural group favored over another. But when you look at the data, when you look at what we put together as conveners, you see a pattern and a trend. And that pattern and that trend, of course, has been one where I think the Native American community feels very excluded from the civic life of the city, in spite of City Hall sitting on very sacred ground in the Tangvan culture. You know, the report that we put together at the end, I think summarized or gave a couple of options. In an ideal world, Mr. Chairman, would that have been the only two options that we would have given? We tell you that, you know, Mr. O'Farrell read off some stats indicating that several cities across our nation have begun to take this issue up in their municipalities. And some of those changes have taken place. But there have been other municipalities that have had hybrid of this celebration, where they do create an Indigenous Peoples Day as a symbolic celebration day. But a lot of municipalities, some of which Mr. O'Farrell read out, have done away with Columbus Day altogether, and they don't celebrate it any longer. And in those communities, there's been real heavy organizing behind those historical wrongs that Mr. O'Farrell outlined in his remarks. In our report, we give time not only to give you a lay of the land of Indigenous peoples that are living here today, give you a historical context for that presence, but we also talk about the presence of Italian Americans and their contribution to Los Angeles and what Los Angeles is today. We also talk about the indigenous migrant communities as well. So there is that link, right? We do make mention of the fact that we have Mayans and Zapotecs and various other indigenous peoples that are making Los Angeles their home as well. So we give you also what LA looks like today in terms of the Native American presence and where they're at. And then we give you a little sense of the community response with that. I think that the other component that I want to also underscore is that the the Italian American community had always been very amiable and very willing to engage in this conversation. So there was no, I felt no animosity. It just wanted to get something. They wanted to be heard. They wanted that heritage to still be a part of the fabric and sort of the civic life of Los Angeles. So, okay. Given those, we in our conclusions we had that one option, and like I said to you earlier, if there were, if 2020 being what it is, or we would probably have added a third component, right, to those options, which would have given us maybe a hybrid or other options.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't, in fact, I'll ask you some questions.
Yes, sir.
Prior to bringing up the members from the public, and maybe they can give responses to some of the questions that I asked you, and maybe some of the other members may ask as well. So, and Mr. O'Farrell, you feel, you can come back to the table, or feel free to just jump up and chime in. Okay, again, the sense that I get, and then after reading the letter that was signed by 4 members of this council, it would lead me to believe a few things. Number one, that this council, and members, if I'm wrong, cut me off, stop me, that the members of this council would be supportive of the creation of an Indigenous People Day. I think that is something that we would support, okay? Mm-hmm. Also, I think that this council would be open to a conversation where related to designating a day to celebrate not only immigrants, but all of the people that make this country what it is. I mean, some people could debate if African Americans are immigrants, you know, because we didn't come here by choice.
That's right.
Okay? So we would be open to some kind of designation that would celebrate immigrants and all of the diversity that makes. It seems to me that the difference of opinion is the date. I think this council, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I think that this council would probably vote to remove Columbus Day from the. I believe that this council would probably move to remove Columbus Day from the city code or being recognized as a city holiday. The debate is, do we have to remove that holiday, and is that the date where we'd have to insert, or where we would insert, Indigenous People Day? So that's the conversation. So I don't want to handicap that yet, but I'm saying that would be the conversation. And why would it be necessary that it be done on that day? Again, we would also be open to trying to create a celebration where it relates to the diversity of this country. So it would appear that we, on both sides, so to speak, are this close. The question is the second Monday, and maybe when this would take effect. So I think that's, members, where we find ourselves today. We had the highest respect for the individuals from the Italian American community. I tell a story that I will not share today, but that if it were not for people from that community, I might not be here. I mean, because of basically they saved me at a young age. I feel very strongly about those guys that stepped in and made folks stop, picking on me when I was like 16. But it's not about the Italian American people when you begin to talk about all immigrants. And so we just have to kind of sort our way through this deliberately. And I'd like to open it up to, if you guys want to have some questions, or maybe we can, bring up some of the folk from the audience to say a few words. Because what we would like to do as a committee is be able to recommend something of substance to the full council. And we would like to do that with a unanimous vote from this committee. But there are still concerns that, have been raised. And so I think I saw Mr. Weezer grab his mic. Maybe you want to ask a few questions. Then Mr. Harris Dawson, and then we'll go back and forth with the community. But Mitch, Mr. O'Farrell, if you please stick around for as long as your schedule permits. And Francisco, you do the best you can based on the data that you went through, if you could respond. And then
Absolutely.
hopefully, as I know that some of the people came here, they have prepared statements. I get that. But it would be better to respond to some of the things that we've said so we can get a feel for how you feel. So we'll start off with Mr. Weezer.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. I simply wanted to state that I think you summarized the issues quite well and helped set a framework for the discussion we hope to have tonight. The testimony, I think, surrounded around the framework that the chair has set up would be very informative. And I think the sense of where the council is I would agree with the chair as to where most council members are. It's just an issue of what date. So I really don't have much of questions right now or statements, but just to say that the framework that the chair has set out is exactly where we're at. I am interested, however, in hearing from Mr. O'Farrell about his view on why Indigenous Day should be on Columbus Day, and hear that point of view from Councilmember O'Farrell. If you could please let us know your thoughts on that, please.
So I would ask that everyone reflect on the, the relentless and historic injustices that I outlined in my remarks. As I described it, it's a form of restorative justice, plain and simple. And I think especially relevant in the city of Los Angeles, with not only our indigenous Aboriginal community, if you will, and all that was destroyed through the systems and processes that I mentioned, but also we are home to indigenous peoples from across the Western Hemisphere. It's much larger now, and that has evolved in the last year and a half. To rescind Columbus Day and not replace it with Indigenous Peoples Day would be like getting halfway to winning a game, but you don't ever win the game. And it would be widely perceived as yet another slight, yet another marginalizing of Native America. And I think that it's two sides of the same coin. It's rescind Columbus Day and make it Indigenous Peoples Day. It has a very healing effect. It sends a signal to our young people. It sends a signal that will reverberate across the country that we understand how important symbols are and how destructive symbols can be. And I talked about those symbols coming down in the South. And I think it would be just another wound, if you will, of many wounds that have never had the chance to heal. You name them, and they're out there. They're part of the historical record. So I think it is essential and vital to replace the day with Indigenous Peoples Day. I am more convinced of that now than even when I introduced this resolution. That is certainly the movement. There is an indigenous peoples movement across the planet. It's not just what we're doing here in Los Angeles. That was evidenced in the whole Dakota Access Pipeline experience. And it's very real, and it's not just a political argument. It's a very real psychological piece that I feel passionately must be restored. And I read the letter as well that was circulating, and I think we're all supportive of creating a celebration of immigrants and migrants and those who didn't have the choice and weren't immigrants but were forced to come here. That's a whole conversation that should be had. We had this conversation over the past year and a half. Let's have that conversation too. But let's move forward with rescinding Columbus Day and replacing it with Indigenous Peoples Day.
May I add one thing? I thank you for that. Sure. I think that one word that kept coming back up was the word trauma for the Native American community, and trauma in the context of a repeated offense. And I think that you asked the question, and you asked it right, Mr. Chairman. You asked about, I'm sorry, it was you, Councilmember Wizard, right? But you asked why the second Monday, right? And I think that if hearing the community correctly, that day for them is a day of trauma, and that long arc of history, right? That long, the trauma keeps coming back. I'll just say that during our convergence between the Native American community and the Italian American community, that was very evident in the room. The Native American folks were very kind and very honest. So were the Italian Americans. But one word kept surfacing, and that word was, please listen to our pain. And that pain is about a repeated offense, and that day symbolizes that offense. So I just wanted to, because you just sparked that and thinking about that. As a city that is really made up of immigrants, I believe that it's a no-brainer that the city should honor immigrants. But I think that if we're going to really drill deep into this issue of Native Americans, the people who were here prior to us coming here, then we would consider these issues.
I'll just add to that, Francisco. Let us not miss the opportunity to overcome a historical slight and institute yet another one.
Mr. Harris Dawson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the report. Thank you for Mr. O'Farrell for raising this issue and allowing us to have this discussion in this important exercise in democracy. You know, the issues of holidays, as an African American in this United States, certainly the concept of long-term trauma resonates with me, and I think all African Americans can feel it in the present and going back. Certainly on the issue of holidays, it's very interesting if you look at the history of two holidays in the United States. One is Memorial Day. Most people don't know Memorial Day that we just celebrated actually started because former slaves in the South wanted to celebrate the victory of the North in the Civil War. And of course, the Southern states wouldn't allow that celebration, so they called it, Memorial Day as a way to front and make it okay to have a celebration when what they were really celebrating was the end of slavery. And Lincoln's birthday. Lincoln's birthday was celebrated because, again, it was a way to celebrate the fall of slavery in a country that wouldn't celebrate it, and that later morphed into what we now know as Black History Month. And we have the Lincoln's birthday remaining as a holiday. When history moves, which I think we're in a period where history is moving now, you referenced the monuments coming down in the South. Across the street here in Councilman Weezar's district, we're going to tear down Parker Center, which I'm very happy about. And I was very passionate about seeing that happen. But we shouldn't forget, I hope that we don't forget, that when you make these changes, it's difficult. It was the great sociologist who said that equity feels like oppression to the people who had been privileged. And it just does. You can't get around that. And in this moment, in this country where we have a person in the White House who's pushing the idea that we can't all win. If they win, you lose. If immigrants have a job, that means you can't have a job, right? If women have equality, that means you can't really be a man. If these people over here are doing well, that means you got to do poorly. China can't do well and the United States do well. Either the United States has to do well or China, and China does bad, or vice versa. And this is an idea that we want to reject. And in the context of this debate, I really worry about that dynamic or that polarity coming up and characterizing the question, like either we have the day or they have the day. There's no way that we can both win, which is a little tricky for me because there are 365 days in the year. Can you talk some about how folks that have gone through this process before have avoided that polarity and this sort of, if they win, I lose, or, something has to be taken from me in order for justice to be done for them?
I think that's the argument that that is being laid out. I think what you just articulated really well. That's the argument that's being laid out for equity. So you said equity for some seems. Can you repeat?
Equity feels like oppression to the people who are in privilege.
I'm not saying that that's what's happening here, but I am saying that there's an element to what you just said right now. This is the way we've always done it. The heart of the matter here really goes back to the concept of a zero-sum game. As you just said, where at some point maybe the perception is that there's favoritism to one group and it's sort of the exclusion of another group. So we obviously, you said tricky, we feel like we don't, as a city, as a Human Relations Commission, obviously those are things that matter deeply to us. Exclusion is something we avoid at all cost. Part of our mandate is to be inclusive. But also, I think historical context matters. The history of this issue matters. The countless voices on this issue matter. And how one frames this issue matters. And so I think your question is, the issue is going to end up having a loser and a winner. And we want to get to a place where we're all winning and that the city wins, that the citizens win, and that ultimately we also get a group that had felt that had never won to all of a sudden be right there, right, as full members of the civic life of the city of Los Angeles. Am I saying this isn't easy? No. And we're looking at that date. We're looking at the historical meaning of that date. And I'm going to tell you what I've been told by the Native American community. Given another day, another celebration, would be akin to a slap in the face for a lot of people. And this is sort of the anecdotal information that I get, minus the data that we've collected. But certainly that's the quandary, or that's the question, the central question.
If I could jump in for a second, but I want you to finish your thought. When Mr. Harris Dawson said what he said, great question. But I think 2-3 years ago, that question wasn't, maybe it wasn't even a question, okay? But now, after this past November, given who you have in the White House, and that they look for opportunities like this to divide us, that we need to at least be conscious of that as we're going forward. Because when they talk about let's make America great again, America was not great for most of the people that were sitting in this room. But what it does do, what it does do, good people, dear people, what it does do, it gives this percentage of folk that are thriving off of this division, it gives them additional tools or ammunition to try to make the divide wider. And I kind of think that you were going there. And that's kind of like my fear, that you will have a band of folk that will say, the heck with them. This is our country. We defeated them. This is America. So I just, I'm just throwing it out, not saying that it influences what I will do, but I do think that we have to realistically assess for every action that there will be an opposite reaction. And it just destroys me, like somebody shooting gasoline in my veins to give this administration anything else that they can use to make people think that it's okay to look at us as if we don't belong here, or that if we're second-class citizens. So but anyway, I'm sorry to cut you off, but you pushed the button. You pushed the button with the old man on that one.
No, I think the chair is exactly right. That's exactly what I was trying to get at, given this situation. My next question was about Italian Americans in particular, because, one could also argue it the other way. It was like, oh, there was this day for Italians, and now all of a sudden it's for all immigrants, right? And so, how does that work? I will tell you, as an African American, it strikes me a little weird. It's like, okay, the only two groups of people that immigrant leaves out are African Americans and Native Americans, right? It just does, right? Because we're not in that category. So my specific question was, getting at this question, since we know there are people in this country that will use this as an opportunity to say, see, they're trying to ice you out. This is not your country anymore. They're trying to take it back. They're trying to take it from you. That's why we have the Make America Great Again campaign, because we've got to put those people back in their place. For the people thinking about the people who will say that, as you did the review of other cities, as you did the review, because I remember asking you to look around the world, certainly around the Americas where this was done, did anybody deal with Italian Americans specifically? As opposed to just, as opposed to immigrants broadly.
Off the top of my head, I think that Italian Americans in all of the cities probably had coalitions built to try to avoid that happened. So I think that nationally, I think Italian Americans are not all, and I think we can sort of make broad statements about all Italian Americans, because I know Italian Americans in the city of Los Angeles who support the replacement of Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day. But anecdotally, I think that I also have to say to you that there's another Mitch in New Orleans. His name is Mitch Landrieu, and he gave a speech this year that the speech really centered around three principles. It was about restorative justice. It was about the courage to take on restorative justice. And it was about doing the right thing. And in that speech, I think our Mitch O'Farrell, highlighted that part of the process here was to make a deep evaluation of what symbols mean, and what symbols mean to the city of, what those symbols, those southern symbols meant after the Civil War to African Americans. And you just mentioned that in your comments. The exclusion, often, right? And I think that I'll let you go with this one anecdote where this one, Mitch Landrieu alluded to this one person who was watching the last of those monuments be removed. And by the way, those folks had to do it with masks, and it was a whole effort because of exactly what you're talking about, this sort of backlash to having it be that the country belongs to a few and not the whole, right? Or that the country is increasingly being slipped out of the hands of the people who had for a long time assumed that it was theirs. And so, it was this African-American couple who had, with their child, who had been watching this item removed, and for the first time, they could breathe a sigh of relief that those symbols that represented so much oppression and trauma for them were being removed from the city of New Orleans. And I think it was that Mr. Landrieu sort of couched everything to talk about having the vision and the courage to do the right thing, and that there is no right time to do the right thing, that the right thing is the right thing. And so that was just sort of what, but I didn't answer your question directly.
Yeah.
So I will follow up with that question about Italian Americans throughout the country and sort of where their opposition was and where it was mostly felt.
But you know what? We all have, tight schedules, so I'm certain that the members who signed the letter wish that they could be here so that they could be engaged in this conversation like Mr. O'Farrell. So, and I'm sure if we make a decision and we get to the council floor, we will hear their side, which is important. We stand for hearing both sides of the story. But I know that I have, and I hate to do this to you, and I hate to put you on the spot, but I think I'm going to ask you to come on up. And Potenza is with the Federated Italian American. So I'm going to ask you to come up here. And did you come by yourself? Or do you have...
I came by myself, but I believe the Knights of Columbus sent a representative
And
as
who
well.
is that, Isaac?
I believe so. I don't know.
Isaac,
If he's here.
are you the rep? Why don't you just come? And so what I'm going to do is let you get engaged in this conversation as a possible counter point. And then I will call up the folk that put in cards. So I'm going to remove your card, Ann, and Isaac, and let the two of you say something for a bit. And then we're going to have to go to the folk that are here. But I don't want this to appear to be one-sided. So I want to afford you the opportunity, and we might even have a question or two.
Thank you very much, President. Thank you, committee. I appreciate, as the president of the Federated Italo Americans, to be able to answer part of the question that you posed to Francisco. Thank you, Francisco. Regarding, like it was said earlier, that yes, the Italians and the Italian American community does agree that we would like to have an Indigenous Peoples Day. The only opposition is for it replacing Columbus Day. That's where we have. What you have to go back is why the myth that it's only Italian Americans that care about Columbus, which is not true. The fact that it became a holiday when at the time of the biggest Italian immigration was at the time in the 1900s, when the Italians were looked at, probably how we look at some of the immigrants coming in now or trying to come in now. And they were Dagos and they were Wops and they were nothing more than, I'm sure, the people in this room feel like when they're faced with the injustices of people that have been here before and look at newcomers as if they have nothing to bring. That is when Columbus Day became a holiday, because they knew that the Italian people and immigrants, because at the same time was when the Irish were coming and when others needed a hero to say, it's okay to come from another country, and for the things that you have contributed here are important. And when they go back to Columbus, yes, when you look at the history books, everything that Councilman O'Farrell said I've read in the history books, there's one part, though, that is left out. And when I had to come to grasp how I would represent the Italian American community, myself caring for every person in this room that wants to be treated fairly and like a human being, whether you were brought here involuntarily from Africa or you were enslaved by your own people or other people, I had to do my research. And one of the things that kept coming back is we hear that Columbus was the one to set in motion every crime that brings us up to today, which I could almost say up to today, the things that we are going through in our own government at this time. And what I need to bring to the attention, if we're going to look at only the bad, we have to at least put in the record and recognize that because of Columbus's journey here in 1492, it also set in motion the Columbian Exchange, which is the largest exchange of plants, animals, population, technology, ideas between the old world and the new world. That is why we are all here right now. That is what then opened the route and the way for later on Amerigo Vespucci to come on the same naval chart that Columbus did and find himself, instead of just in Hispaniola, to find his way to the Americas. Nobody in our community is discounting that there were indigenous people here. We know that they were. What we celebrate in Columbus Day is that we have come to the country because of the open channel of a voyage of discovery that opened the doors for us to come as the European colonizers, Western immigrants. And the last thing I'll say, I'll ask you questions, but I just want people to think of this. And you could think of it however you want. I went to the store today and I bought 8 beautiful pieces of fruit and vegetables. We have a banana, we have corn, lemon, apple, potato, avocado, oranges, and tomatoes. 4 of these items were brought from the old world, the people that came with Columbus and after him, to this country. 4 of the items were brought back from this country, this world, back to the old world. That is important. This is just food. It doesn't even touch on all the other things because our continent got closer. Our world got closer because of this Columbian exchange. And every single person here, I'm sure, has enjoyed these items. Please, I beg you, look up what the Columbian exchange is. Know which ones came from Columbus's journeymen and what came from the indigenous people.
So
because
let me ask you this, Ann.
Yes.
Are you saying that you would not support the change? Let's say we changed Columbus Day to some form of Immigrant Day or whatever. So are you saying that you would be opposed to that?
I personally do not oppose to the purpose of why Columbus Day was made a holiday, was to protect the immigrants at that time, that they would be human beings.
But would you oppose a name change, is the question.
To an immigrants, to celebrate the immigrants' contributions, no, I would not.
Okay, that's fair.
I would not.
Isaac?
Same question, or?
Well, why don't I'm giving you an opportunity to say what you want to say.
Thank you so
much. Then I might ask the same question. We are genuinely curious.
Well, I'm here speaking on behalf of the Knights of Columbus.
Go right ahead.
And I'm not sure how much you know, but, as an order who we go by the namesake of Columbus, we're not opposed to the holiday at all. We're actually in favor of the indigenous community having their own holiday, again, just not at the expense of Columbus Day. It should be understood that the importance of Columbus Day is to signify that we have a day where we really want to create this justice for everyone who came to this country and where this originated from. And I think it's key to note that the arguments behind Columbus Day and where this was taken out of context historically was that it was a result of ideological history. And forgive me, I'm trying to go here without my glasses, but really this all started when scholars, including Professor Carla Delaney, who's of Stanford University, has gone into the history books and has looked and done the research that Columbus was actually not the way he's being portrayed in the history books. I have articles that have been published by Delaney to showcase and prove that. Also, it should be noted that Columbus was also really big on dealing with his own people when he was here who punished Native Americans, making sure that they were thought of, that they had their rights just as much as his people did. So the perception of him as a man is really misconstrued. And I think it's more important to understand that where this all kind of comes from is this all started because As Ann mentioned, when Columbus Day was originally formulated, it was to support the immigrants that were here in this country. And the notion of going against this was something that was established by the Ku Klux Klan. Now, their plan in the 1920s, they wanted to make sure that somebody who was Catholic was not honored and not given a spotlight in this country. That was really important to them. So they created and supported this propaganda, which we also know as, forgive me.
No, take your time.
Today we call it the Black Legend. And this is where the history books have shown that anything that was, all the adversaries of Spain were highlighted, and all of these things, Hispania, everything that has to do with this Latino origin was brought forward, and it made at that point to submerge this and go against what this country stood for. This is an initiative that was started by the Ku Klux Klan. I've got articles to prove it. Furthermore,
I wouldn't doubt that they didn't support that. I wouldn't doubt that at all.
well, and this goes back to this divisive question that we have, where why can't we all win? And as an organization who stands for charity and stands alongside the church, it's important for us to think first and foremost of all of us as people and understanding the importance of listening to our brothers, making sure this community is represented. And again, we stand by and support that they have a day that is representative and indicative of this beautiful indigenous culture. I myself am Mexican. I'm not Italian. I was brought here as a young boy. I was lucky enough to immigrate under the Reagan administration, and I'm an American. I'm an American. I volunteer for this organization, and the only reason why I do anything in my life is for two simple things. One, it makes me money, or it makes me happy. And it really makes me happy to be here and support this organization that does so much good work, and understanding the fundamentals behind who this person was and celebrating this as a holistic part of our country, not as a divisive nature of what hate represents today.
Well, I want to thank you, Isaac, and Ann. I want to thank you for coming and, speaking your mind. It takes a sense of courage. I mean, you get a feeling that the majority of the people in the room may feel differently than you. So that's one of the things that makes this country great, where individuals can come and state their case, and we listen objectively. But I do want to ask you, Isaac, what I asked Ann. Based on a letter that I received from 4 of our colleagues, if I read this correctly, they are saying that we support the creation of an Immigrant Heritage Day to succeed Columbus Day. And so my question is, would you support that?
I think supporting that would take away from what we stand for in this country. And by the way, one more quick thing just to add to this is that I also have an article from a black pastor who talks specifically about how divisive this situation would be if we were to replace Columbus Day with anything else, especially an Indigenous Peoples Day.
Well, I would love for you to submit a copy of that.
I have copies for the council of
Okay.
all of these articles, including a poll, a Marist poll conducted by our organization that showcases how popular and how people don't necessarily see negativity within Columbus. Again, obviously understanding the sensitivities of the indigenous community, we fully support them having their own day. However, it showcases the value and the importance of also remembering the exploration and that kind of discovery that Columbus stood for, and exactly as Ann mentioned, what that now represents in our culture day to day here today.
All right, cool. If I could get you guys, if you're gonna stay around, maybe you could just sit on the front row over there next to Mr. O'Farrell's staff. Her name is Star. She's a good person.
Sure.
You sit next to her.
Thank you.
And then there may be some other questions. But members, if it's okay with you, I think we want to start hearing from some of the folk that were here. Is this Shannon? Is this Shannon Speed? Issa K. Minskin? Andrea Garcia? Please come forward. And Ann Walnum? Yes, ma'am.
Chukmashki, thank you for your attention to this important matter. I've tossed out all my notes. My name is Shannon Speed. I am a Chickasaw tribal citizen and director of the American Indian Studies Center at UCLA. I came before you today to ask you to abolish Columbus Day and establish Indigenous Peoples Day in its place. And I'm very gratified to hear that there is strong support for Indigenous Peoples Day. So what I want to emphasize to you now is the second part of that Indigenous Peoples Day should be established in its place on the second Monday of October. Why do I say that? I'm also happy to hear about an initiative for an Immigrants' Day. I support that wholeheartedly on any other day of the year. Why? Because symbolics matter here. Indigenous people, American Indians are the only people who are not encompassed by the inclusive category of Immigrants' Day. We are not immigrants to this land. Indigenous peoples are not...
Go finish your thought.
The Indigenous peoples are not just another ethnic minority in this country, although other people, we certainly don't have the only form of oppression.
Okay.
They are the original peoples, the rightful owners of this land that have suffered dispossession and genocidal policies in order to make way for...
Okay, I want to just give you extra time to finish your... I don't want to be a hard guy and cut you off, but I want to try to keep it. And if I could have the next speaker, and thank you for coming. Yes, ma'am.
When Mitch O'Farrell was sworn in, an historic event took place as the chief of the Wyandot tribe came down and gave a history of the tribe that was very powerful as they were driven out of Canada, driven to the Northwest, and then came to Oklahoma. To me, that swearing in was an historic moment, not only for Los Angeles, but it should have been recognized nationally and internationally. And what has been happening in terms of dilution of the history with this immigrant, you need to go further back. In his history, he didn't go back to the papal decrees which divided the hemisphere between the Spanish and the Portuguese, so they shouldn't kill each other. And so they were told that if you land on any land where the people...
Finish your sentence.
Where the people are not Christians and do not become baptized, you can kill them and take their land. This is the mindset of these travelers who are bringing fruits and vegetables back and forth.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, hey, we'll get to hear more speakers if we calm down on the applause. So identify yourself, please.
Good evening. My name is Andrea Garcia. I'm a proud Native physician and a proud Native Angelino. It's my opinion as a physician that you cannot deny the inextricable relationship that this holiday has with that of health, the health of Native people. Medical literature is ripe, actually, with evidence on the effects of trauma and historical trauma and its connection to preterm death, cardiovascular disease, COPD, substance abuse, mental health illnesses. And so when you know that that literature is there, every time that a Native person hears reminders codified by holidays such as these, reminders of cultural genocide, it reinforces that trauma. So I asked myself, what are some of the consequences suffered by Native people in Los Angeles today? The Office of Women's Health in LA County recently put out a report where they found that 40% of Native women living in Los Angeles County had suicidal ideation. 40%. And this is compared to 8% of all women living in Los Angeles. That's just one of the terrible adverse health effects. I'm going to finish my sentence.
Finish your thought.
So I'm not saying that trauma is the only cause of these terrible health outcomes for my people, but I can say is, why would you not repeal a painful reminder of our history and replace it with a day that reinforces the strength and resilience of my people? And I would implore you to make sure that LA is the leader in health.
Thank you. Thank you. So, as the next speaker comes forward, I think it's Ann Walnum, Assad, Rudy Ortega, Willie Sandoval, Joseph Betta. Yes, ma'am.
1 or 2 minutes?
1.
Okay. I really appreciate Mitch introducing this. It's very, very timely. However, more than 100, almost 200 years ago, here in Los Angeles, the beginning city fathers treated the indigenous very, very badly. They made them move their village 4 times. Then they made them get out of town totally. There was a practice of getting men in jail every weekend for drunkenness. Then they were available from jail for city projects. There was a lot of unfairness. We know now from the excellent work in the book American Genocide how really, truly genocide took place in California. So this is a very timely issue. I believe that we need to look at this issue not just from the fact that history is written by the winners, but put it more winners.
And your name again, you were Ann? Were you, your name for the record?
My name, W-A-L-N-U-M.
Gotcha. Thank you. Next speaker. Identify yourself.
Assad Beg with Advancement Project, a public policy organization focusing advocacy efforts on education, health, public budgets, and political engagement. Speaking on Council File 151343, which would establish Indigenous Peoples Holiday as a city holiday. As you already know, the Los Angeles Human Relations Commission conducted an analysis, a survey that impacted the community relations and historical importance of the motion. The commission reported on the following: 88% of participants supported the creation of Indigenous Peoples Day, and 86% of participants supported Indigenous Peoples Day as a city-wide holiday. According to the Pew Research Center, Columbus Day is one of the most inconsistently celebrated holidays in the United States. It's one of 10 federal holidays, meaning federal workers get the day off, but beyond that, only 23 states recognize it as a holiday. In recent years, cities of Seattle, Minneapolis have celebrated Indigenous Peoples Day as a holiday. Advancement Project encourages you to take a strong position of support and replace Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day. Thank you so much.
Boy, that was a lot in less than a minute. I gotta give you credit for that. Next.
I'm not going to go that fast.
He was going.
Yeah, just
Go ahead. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. My name is Rudy Ortega, Jr. I'm the chairman of the Los Angeles City County Native American Commission. I'm also the tribal president of the Fernandino, Tatavia, and Band of Mission Indians. I support Indigenous Day 100%. It's just plain and simple. It's time to do it. We're all tired. We're exhausted. My families are, and people from my tribe, actually some of them descend from Yagna, which is right here in downtown Los Angeles, and it's long overdue. Let's correct the past. Let's do it. It's time to do it now. All the people here, stand up if you're for Indigenous Peoples Day. All these people here, it's time for us to do it. Let's start the creation of going forward now, and it's time to move forward. Immigration Day, another day, and there's 360 days, 365 days. Let's choose another day for that. Definitely honor those people as well. But Indigenous people are the first and always the last and forgotten. Let's not forget them. Let's not forget my tribe. My tribe's always forgotten. People don't even know my tribe exists. Let's do it. Let's get it done. Thank you.
Okay, now Rudy, I'm going to take advantage of you because I kind of know you. Why is it not a victory if the Columbus Day is removed? So in itself, that's a victory. There will be no celebration officially, and a Indigenous Peoples Day is created, but not on that second Monday. Just give me your response. I hate to put you on the spot,
Right.
but...
Well, it's not a victory because, one, I'm not Hispanic, I'm not Latino, I'm not an immigrant, and what Columbus represents had put those labels on me and on my families.
No, but what I said, say we eliminated that day.
If
we
we
put
eliminate-
nothing else on that day. It's gone.
Gone.
Nothing else is on that day. A Native American Day is created another day. And let's say they do an immigrant day, and that's another day.
It's pretty much saying like the bully in the schoolyard beats you up and tells you, I'll beat you up tomorrow again. And essentially, if we don't do it and replace and identify and address the issue up front, then there's no point of curing or telling the people who are indigenous that they can stand up proud and be who they are. So replacing it and putting it on a different date doesn't make sense. It's not a victory, it's not a win, it's...
Yeah, hold tight, Rudy. I think I got another question
Yeah.
for you.
So, is there any significance to the second Monday other than that it was Columbus Day?
Essentially, again, just a correction of history. I mean, we're told here in California, Fa Sarah, they made him a saint. It's that whole thing. We just keep losing. We're the losers at all ends. We want one little victory over one battle. They may give us reservations. They may give us something as far as Native people, tribal nations, but we still haven't won. We lost over 90, 100% of who we are in lands, water rights, everything else that goes with it. And our children, even in mascots, if you look at all these histories, we are always losing. We're not even on the bus at all. And if you're asking about why not replace it, I mean...
Well, I'm asking about I just want to get clear. So restorative justice is one very, very important thing that's very hard to resist. Is there significance to that date other than that it has the history of being Columbus Day?
It's simply the history of a Columbus.
It's the history of Columbus Day.
It is.
Got it. Thank you.
It is.
That's fair enough,
That's
Rudy.
good.
And we're not going to ask questions of everybody, but some of you to come up, we may. So thank you for participating, okay? So, and I'm going to be looking for Leland Morrell, Patricia Lopez, and Victoria Charlesworth. Yes, identify yourself, sir.
Okay. Hi, my name is Willie Sandoval, and I am an administrative assistant at the United American Indian Involvement, and I was born and raised in Los Angeles. My parents came to Los Angeles on the 1954 relocation program. My father's from the Navajo Nation, my mom's from the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska, and she's also part Menominee. And basically, the Federal Relocation Act was part of the genocide to continue to get rid of Native Americans, to assimilate them in cities. This genocide started with Christopher Columbus when he came here, and he started to enslave Native Americans, and he continued that. And for the sake of gold and his greed, he started to enslave Native Americans. And because when they wouldn't get enough gold, he would cut off their hands, and he would stick their dogs on them. So this is the history of Christopher Columbus, is what the things that we don't want people to understand. We don't want your chairman, your children, or anybody to know in this history and to live by that. That's why we want to eliminate Christopher Columbus, to give the truth and to bring Native American, Indigenous Peoples Day to show the culture that is here and that does nurture the country and everything that was here before that. Christopher Columbus is a slap in the face of Native Americans.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Joe Berra, I'm law faculty at UCLA. I'm a proud Italian American, but I am not proud of the Italian American community's embrace and identification with Christopher Columbus. My four grandparents had nothing in common with the colonial project under the service of the Spanish crown of Christopher Columbus. And I would venture to say that's the same of all of the ancestors of our Italian American community. We don't go and we don't need to identify with him. Ms. Potenza is right. It came about because of a sense of discrimination, a sense of feeling left out and not belonging, but they latched on to the wrong symbol. And if we create Immigrants Day on top of and replacing Columbus Day, it's the same mistake of all the immigrant populations to identify that. That's why it's important to replace that with Indigenous Peoples Day. And just one word to my Italian American community, if I might. A little humility, please. Humility is not humiliation. It's a sign of greater dignity and greater graciousness, and we should support our Indigenous peoples here in Los Angeles.
Thank you. So if I can get Leland Morrell, Patricia Lopez, Victoria Charlesworth, I think it's Rob Kwan, Sylvia Salazar. Yes.
Hi, my name is Leland Morrell. I'm a citizen of the Navajo Nation, a resident of Los Angeles, a voter, and I am here to emphasize abolishing Christopher Columbus Day and establishing it as Indigenous Peoples Day in the city of Los Angeles. First, I want to talk about Columbus Day, and I think What we're referring to right now is the Columbus Day that was established in 1937 that was lobbied by the Knights of Columbus. However, there was a previous Columbus Day that was done on October 21st, 1892, the third Friday of October, or the 21st of October, that President Benjamin Harrison declared as Columbus Day, which was the 400th anniversary of Columbus coming to Hispaniola, and he never set foot in the United States, any of the states. And so I think that replacing it by that and also educating our children about that and all the other things that have happened to Native Americans is a really great thing.
Thank you. If I could get the next speaker.
Patricia Lopez, Native American Commissioner for the City and County of Los Angeles, appointed by Janice Hahn, product of Indian relocation. My parents came here on the Indian Relocation Act. We ended up right there by the LA River. We are unique people. I am not an immigrant. Native Americans are not immigrants. My village of Taos, New Mexico, my home there is 600 years old. We are a UNESCO site. We are not immigrants. It's time that we be recognized. We be recognized for our existence, our very existence, our history, and our contributions. What Columbus brought, he set in motion the genocide, the historical trauma, the white privilege, the racism, the raping of Mother Earth. And we have been working on this for 2 years. I met Francisco 2 years ago in his very office. Can I just say one more thing?
Go ahead, wrap it up.
I'm a clinician at United American Indian Involvement Clinic, where we service 122 federally recognized tribes that are here in the LA area. We need this recognition. We need this day to heal. I hope you listen to my plea. Creator hears me.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, and I want to make sure that I was clear and the reading of the letter was clear where it relates to my other colleagues that sent the letter. I wouldn't want anybody to suggest or to think that they are suggesting that there not be a separate Indigenous People Day. They are supporting that, and they are suggesting another day which is unnamed but some reference to heritage. So just know that they are not, let's at least try to get the facts down. That's not what they're doing. So if I could get the next speaker, identify yourself and make your statement.
Hi, my name is Victoria Gemmell Charlesworth.
A little louder into the mic.
Victoria Gemmell Charlesworth. I'm
Gotcha.
Pit River, Wentuniana, and Athabascan Nations. Many of us are here today and have been here many times on this item to speak for the voiceless, the younger generation, and the ancestors who sacrificed their lives in support to dismantle systems of oppression, racial structures, and institutions. Each of you are chosen leaders to navigate and represent the voice of the people, adhering to oaths and codes of ethics. We wish to replace Columbus Day as a holiday to stop erasure of the Indigenous people's contributions of elaborate trade systems, commerce, and advancements. We are here to request to stop making holidays erecting statues of individuals not worthy. We are here to request that truth and teach truth in the actions committed here and in historical records. We need to uplift humanity fighters and bring balance by changing this holiday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
we'll
you.
keep coming back
It's fine.
every year until change.
Okay, that's fine. Come on. Yes, sir.
Rob Kwan, I think it's important to remember that history isn't merely written by the victors, it's reaffirmed by their descendants. If you look at the city's website, under the history of Los Angeles, there's no mention of the indigenous populations anywhere. What does that say? Are we confronting our history honestly? If we look at our first governor in his first State of the State address, he said, "A war of extermination will continue to be waged between the races until the Indian race becomes extinct. The inevitable destiny of the race is beyond the power or wisdom of man to avert." These are things we weren't taught in class. To answer the call of your question, are you righting a wrong or trying to avoid a problem? Are you going to try to heal a gaping wound or stick a political Band-Aid on it?
Okay, so Ms. Salazar, and if I could get, I think it's Catherine Chu, Sherry White, Carrie Copson. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Sylvia Mendivi Salazar. I am Yaqui and Atham. I'm not an immigrant. I am with the Office of Native American Concerns with the Archdiocese of Los Angeles and also Chair PUCU, which is a nonprofit community service organization in the San Fernando Valley. I hopefully, and I pray that Columbus Day can be replaced and will be replaced by Indigenous Day. It can begin a healing process for both Native, Indigenous people, and non-Indigenous societies. Columbus left a legacy of trauma for my peoples. And also, with that replacement, it is that the people maybe adopt our hospitality. And our Native Indigenous hospitality is to honor the people of the lands where you set up a new residence or you visit.
Thank you. Could you stay there for 1 second?
I have a question.
Was your question in her, Mr. Weezar?
Yes, you mentioned you were with what group? With the Archdiocese, right here. With the Archdiocese?
Native American Concerns. I'm the coordinator.
Okay, and is it the official position of that group and by extension of the Archdiocese that we should replace Columbus Day by Indigenous Peoples Day?
Under Native American Concerns, that's what I represent.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is Catherine George Chu. I am a tribal member with the Colville Confederated Tribes in Washington State. I am also a member of the Native American Caucus. I'm a Los Angeles County resident, and I also sit on the Commission on Disabilities appointed by Supervisor Hahn. I am here in support of Indigenous Peoples Day. I also support all of our immigrants. I think the reason why I live here in Los Angeles is because of the diversity. I think all immigrants have something to contribute. When there was the threat of the Muslim ban, I was the first one to run down to LAX and march for our Muslim brothers and sisters. And so I hope that we can replace Columbus Day and also have an Immigrants Day. I think that's important. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, my name is Carrie Copson, and I'm here to have Indigenous Day to be replaced by, to take out Columbus Day. I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, 10 minutes from the Isleta Indian Reservation. I am part of the Standing Rock movement, and I have learned more about history, about the Native American, than I ever did when I was in school. All I knew was what I saw on television, that Indians were savages and they killed people, and I really didn't know, even growing up next to an Indian reservation. And I think by making it Indigenous Day, kids have got to know the history of our first settlers. They were here first. They're not immigrants. This was their land before anybody came here. And I think by having it, the kids today in history classes can learn more about the indigenous people. I can ask you, when you were in school, did you know anything about Native Americans and what they did for, did you? No. We learned it from watching television.
Yeah.
Right? Watching John Wayne. And we did not know the truth about it. I've learned more being with the Standing Rock movement about Native Americans than I have ever done in my.
Thank you. So if I could have our next speaker, and then I'll be looking for Marcos. I saw him earlier. Marcos Aguilar and Raul Garcia. Yes, please identify yourself.
Good evening. My name is Sherry White. I am a full-blooded Ho-Chunk from the state of Wisconsin. I've been living here in California, Los Angeles County, for 35 years. I grew up in a foster home where it was not easy being a Native American. I came out here, I found a whole new environment. But the one thing that I am trying to teach my grandchildren is they should be proud to be a Native American. They should be proud to be who they are. But when they look at people like Mr. Christopher Columbus, and you try and explain to them, why are we celebrating him? It's difficult. So I'm asking that you please give us our Indigenous Peoples Day. Give us back our pride. And I do thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Marcos Aguilar, Huitzilisli, here on behalf of Anahuacalmecac, the only Indigenous Peoples public independent charter school in Los Angeles. Thank you, Council President Wesson and Councilman Huizar, as well as Councilman Harris-Dawson. On behalf of our school, we're here to ask that Indigenous Peoples Day replace Columbus Day. To not do so would continue to perpetuate the fact that the city of Los Angeles as a public entity has been complicit in the racism that Columbus Day represents for all these years. And that is why it must be on the exact city holiday that it has celebrated all these years in the past. But as Columbus and those that followed him said to our ancestors, if you do not do this, this was their warning. If our ancestors did not heed their call to become Christians, to become enslaved by them, he said, if you do not do this and maliciously make delay in it, I certify to you that with the help of God we shall powerfully enter into your country and shall make war against you in all ways and manners that we can, and shall subject you to the yoke and obedience of the church and their highnesses. We shall take you and your wives and your children and shall make slaves of them, and as such shall sell and dispose of them to their highnesses, make command, and we shall take away your goods and shall do all the mischief and damage that we can as to vassals who do not obey and refuse to receive their Lord and resist and contradict him. That is what Columbus Day represents, and it must be repealed on the exact official holiday.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Garcia?
Yes, my name is Raul Garcia. I'm a Huichol and Kumeyaay indigenous people. I was raised in the northeast Los Angeles area and attended LAUSD school system, where I was taught that these lands and its inhabitants were non-existent until a white European discovered it. I was led to believe I was a foreigner on my ancestral land. I'm a current program director for American Indian Changing Spirits, a residential substance abuse disorder treatment center for Native Americans. I see firsthand every day the horrendous lasting effects of intergenerational trauma, racism, boarding schools, missions, forced relocation, and almost fully successful genocide. I sometimes read the signs along our roads in Los Angeles that read Armenian Genocide Martyr Site or the site to recognize the Jewish genocide. Los Angeles needs to do the right thing on the issue and start to replace Columbus Day for Indigenous Peoples Day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank everybody who came. We're going to talk about the possibility of us taking action today. So those of you that submitted cards, you know, like I said at the beginning, we're going to try to take every card. But I do think you should let us figure out with your presence what we will try to do before tonight's end. If you are not afforded the opportunity to speak, and we got to most of the cards, okay, I will admit we got to most of the cards, we will make sure that your cards are put into the record. So again, I want to thank everybody from both sides for coming down. I want to thank Mr. O'Farrell. I get it, just please, let us try to take some action. Mr. O'Farrell, appreciate you coming, appreciate everybody that's come. City Attorney, City Clerk, I'm going to need possibly some help from you as I try to articulate to my colleagues my suggestion or or recommendation. I think we can come very close to accomplishing just about what everybody wants, except for, at the end of the day, one way or the other, where it relates to the actual date, there are going to be some people that would be satisfied, and there will be some people that will be unhappy. So what I would think, I would need some recommendation that would suggest that this committee support the creation of an Indigenous People Day. That we would instruct the CAO or the CLA to engage with our bargaining units, the unions, where it relates to the timing of this taking place, and that we would remove from the administration code Columbus Day on the second Monday, and that we would replace that with Indigenous People Day. Timing-wise, would be based on the recommendation from the, because I don't know if there's some contracts or what have you. I do think we should also do a separate instruction that asks the departments to investigate the possibility of creating some form of a diversity / immigrant / so they should look into, I don't have the word, so I'm struggling to put them, everybody, an America Day, for lack of a better word, we'll call it that. I would think somehow in this recommendation we would need to say that we would want the departments that engage with labor, that we would want this to take place no later than 2019. Okay. So let me, and I do think October 12th, there should be a way, Mr. O'Farrell, you help me with this, to acknowledge that as Italian American Day. Not that there's a holiday, but so we need to, can you kind of tell me how that would sound in a motion? Help me.
So it seems that we've got at least 3 parts. Well, let me clarify one thing. Is your recommendation that Indigenous Peoples Day land on the current day that is Columbus Day?
The second Monday.
Second Monday of October.
Second Monday in October. No, please. Let's write it down and let's see how it comes out.
So there would be at least 4 parts. One, the recommendations from the committee are, 1, the city create an Indigenous Peoples Day. 2, that this day will replace Columbus Day on the second day of October. 3,
I would prefer a better word.
That
I don't know what that word is. I'll let you do that later.
Okay.
But yeah, and it would replace, it would then be celebrated, the Indigenous People Day or whatever we choose to call it would be celebrated on the second Monday, and it would start no later than the 2019 or something.
Right. Columbus Day would be removed from the city calendar, and the CAO and the CLA are instructed to engage with bargaining unions regarding the feasibility of doing this by 2019. And finally,
No later than, no later than
thank
29.
you.
To
By
make
which you
sure
mean-
that the day is in place. I don't know if we have obligations based on labor contracts or anything, so I want to get it done, but I want to give us the flexibility so that we do it and do it right. So that's coming.
And further clarification, when you say by 2019, do you mean by January 1st, 2019, or December 31st, 2019?
Just keep going, and then I want to hear from the members. Maybe they can help.
And then
With that.
finally, the CIO and the CLA should report back, investigate and report back on the possibility of creating an additional day, tentatively called Immigrant Day and/or Diversity Day,
Or American Day,
or American Day.
whatever.
Title to be determined.
But I'd like for them to be moving in the same direction. And I would think, I don't think we have to say the exact date at this point where it relates to, I don't think I have to say January 1st, June 1st, October 12th. I don't think I have to say that yet. But that's, members, just kind of my thoughts. And I wanted to see if you wanted to help refine them some. Mr. Harris-Dawson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think your articulation is pretty close to, is a pretty accurate reflection, one, of what we've heard today, and certainly something I could support. I don't know how appropriate this is or isn't. The city attorney and clerk can perhaps tell me, or perhaps former school board president Weezar. It seems to me that the people that this is most important to are school children. And we have a school district. I don't know if they're considering this or anything, or if it's appropriate for us to send something kind of communication to them that we've taken this, that we're contemplating and are likely to take this step, so that it's also a part of the discussion that they're having.
Mr. Weezar?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think you're correct, and I could support the direction you're going in. And I think the 2019 date, we are in the middle of 2017. The first of 2019 would give us about a year and a half to flesh that out. So I would say the earlier the better in 2019 when we could implement this, because a year and a half, even before we get to the 1st of January 2019, is about a year and a half. So that's sufficient time, I think.
And I agree.
Yeah, so the sooner the better.
If we vote it out of this committee, it will go to the full body as a recommendation. I do think that it probably, if the council approves this, then everyone will know that this is what we're going to do. I just think if we have that time, it gives us the opportunity to educate people what's coming, and the timing of when it's coming, in fairness to other folk. It declares that this is what we're going to do, and it also, if there's any legal concerns, bargaining concerns, which I'm not certain of, it should give us enough time to deal with that. But I think it sends a message where this committee is coming from. And what we'll do is I will, in fairness, I won't schedule this until we return, which would be after our recess. So we will schedule this when we return in January. Not January. Relax. July.
July. And thank you. And just wanted to insert the timing of this, but I think you're correct on that. And also to reiterate what Councilmember Harris-Dawson said, which is if we could also direct staff, should this pass through council, to send over a formal letter to the school district urging them to do the same should this be successful through council. I think that's an appropriate direction that we could probably give our staff and incorporate that if possible. And last but not least, I want to thank Councilmember O'Farrell for your steadfast leadership on this. Since you got to council, this was very important. Good job.
Okay. So, Mr. Clerk, without objection, that rambling, pieced together recommendation is the action of this committee, and if we could have that, I'd like to see that as we get ready to forward it to the full body. So, Mr. Clerk, without objection, that is the order. We have one more piece of business real quick. We have to vote to reconsider item 4. So without objection, item 4, Francis, don't go anywhere. Item 4 is before us, and Mr. Clerk, it's my understanding that we didn't say we will adopt the Ethics Commission's report and request the city attorney to report back with a draft ordinance. Correct. And so that's what we're voting on now. So without objection, so ordered. Thank you for your hard work. Thank everybody for coming. This isn't the end. We move this forward, and it'll be before the full council sometime before the summer's out. Thank you. This committee's adjourned.